The manual had one instruction: do not close your eyes, because in the final seconds of a human life, your body will try to save you. It will flinch, it will fight, and if your eyes close, the Emperor loses a plane, and your death becomes useless. The engine is already screaming. The runway is clear. He is 19, and he knows. He is never coming back. In 2 hours, he will become a guided missile. Behind him, mechanics bow, low, not to him, but to what he represents. In front of him, only the endless, indifferent Pacific. We are told these men were fearless, fanatics, eager for glory, but inside his boot is a letter, one the censors never saw. It reads, "I am afraid of the dark." By late 1944, the Japanese Empire was collapsing. The Navy was gone. Factories were silent. The war was already lost. But the strategy didn't change. It evolved. In desperation, the Japanese High Command stopped asking how to win and started asking how to spend lives. This is the moment war becomes arithmetic. These pilots weren't given flight manuals. They were given instructions for dying. Not how to fight, not how to evade, not how to survive, but how to end a mission in the most controlled, irreversible way possible. It didn't teach them dogfighting or tactics. It taught them how to crash. The manual specified an exact angle of attack, 45 degrees. Not because it created the biggest explosion, but because it removed the possibility of hesitation. At that angle, the aircraft became almost impossible to recover, too steep to pull out of, too fast to rethink. Once committed, the decision was no longer theirs. The manual told them to become still, not calm in the way we understand it, but empty, detached, stripped of instinct. They were instructed to silence the part of the mind that resists death, to suppress the reflex that tells the body to survive at all costs. It was a system, cold, deliberate, and disturbingly effective. A form of psychological programming designed to convert hesitation into obedience, until the act of dying no longer felt like a choice, but a function. Because to make someone fly directly into fire, you don't give them courage. You take away everything else. Training wasn't about skill. It was about submission. Pilots were pushed through exhaustion, kept awake for long stretches, drilled endlessly until repetition replaced thought. There was no room for reflection, no time to process what they were being prepared to do. And when cracks appeared, they were corrected immediately. One trainee hesitated during a drill, only for a moment. He didn't refuse. He didn't speak. He simply paused, just long enough to be noticed. The instructor struck him across the face. Not in anger, but with purpose. A demonstration. A message to everyone watching. Hesitation would not be tolerated. Not because it was disobedient, but because it was human. If you looked at the horizon too long, you were punished, because the horizon suggested distance, and distance suggested escape. If you spoke about your family, you were shamed, because memory reconnected you to a life you were supposed to detach from. If you showed fear, it was dismantled, piece by piece. They were told their lives were lighter than a feather. But feathers don't bleed. They don't think. They don't resist. They don't hesitate at the edge of extinction. During training, some planes never made it back. Not because they were shot down, because no one had taught them how to land. By the final morning, everything had become unnervingly quiet. There were no speeches, no music, no last surge of patriotic energy, just the soft, precise clink of ceramic. Each pilot stepped forward and was handed a small cup of water, Mizu-Sakazuki, a ritual traditionally reserved for those on their deathbed. Here it wasn't symbolic, it was literal. They drank in silence, avoiding eye contact, because there was nothing left to say that hadn't already been understood. They tied their white headbands, pulling them tight across their foreheads, as if tightening control over something that might otherwise slip. Then came the boxes. Small, white, wooden boxes, light enough to carry, permanent enough to matter. Each pilot opened his and placed inside a lock of hair and clippings from his fingernails. Fragments. Because that was all that would remain. The military didn't expect bodies to return, so they took what they could while the boys were still alive. This wasn't a farewell. It was preparation. They were no longer soldiers in the traditional sense. They were payload. And the explosion was the delivery. The government published letters filled with pride, carefully constructed messages of honor, sacrifice, and unwavering belief. But the private letters told a different story. I wanted to see you one more time. I wanted to see the cherry blossoms in the spring. I am cold. There was no triumph in these words, no ideology, just absence. These were not warriors chasing glory. They were boys confronting something they had no language for, realizing, often in their final hours, that they were not participants in a victory, but components in a system. They climbed into aircraft stripped of everything unnecessary, parachutes discarded because survival was not part of the plan, every detail eliminated except the one that mattered. Impact. The engine roared to life, the runway blurred beneath them, and then, without ceremony, the ground disappeared. The moment the wheels left the surface, something irreversible happened. There was no longer a return to the world they had known. Then came the silence. Not external silence, but internal. Hours of engine noise, vibration, and uninterrupted thought. Time stretched. The ocean below appeared still, almost indifferent, as if unaware of what was moving toward it. Every minute forward required a decision, not made once, but repeatedly. Turn back. Don't turn back. Turn back. Don't turn back. No one was watching anymore. No commanding officer. No expectation. No audience. Then the horizon shifted, at first subtly, shapes forming in the distance. Then, movement. Then, chaos. The sky erupted. Anti-aircraft fire filled the air with violent black bursts, each explosion tearing through the space around them. Planes flying nearby disappeared in seconds, consumed by fire, erased before the mind could process what had happened. The cockpit shook under the force of nearby detonations. Shockwaves rippled through the aircraft. Metal vibrated. The controls resisted. Inside the body, everything reacted. Adrenaline surged, hands tightened, vision sharpened. And deep within, something primal began to scream. Pull up, turn back, live. But the manual had already prepared for this. Stay steady, fix your eyes, do not think. The target came into view, small at first, then larger, then unavoidable. Closer, closer. The manual said, do not close your eyes, because in the final moment, the body will attempt one last act of defiance. It will try to save itself, even now, even here, even when the mind has already accepted what is about to happen. And then, impact. But not all of them died. Some turned back. Mechanical failures, lost targets, sudden disorientation. They landed, alive, expecting relief, or at least recognition. Instead, they were treated as something unnatural, beaten, shamed, removed from view. They were placed in what became known as shame barracks, because the system had already recorded them as dead. Their families were notified of their death. To return alive was not a second chance. They were no longer useful, but they were not allowed to exist outside the role they had been given. They were not permitted to live, but they were not permitted to die either. And that was their punishment. The kamikaze did not stop the war. It did not meaningfully slow the American advance. But it revealed something far more dangerous. That surrender was no longer part of the equation, that every remaining life would be used if necessary. And that realization changed everything, because from that point on, the war would not end through negotiation or gradual defeat. It would end through annihilation. If you want to understand the moments that truly shaped our world, one decision at a time, subscribe to Infinite Turning Points.